Hey there tonight. We slip into the smoky hush of a medieval cottage where the air smells of damp wool and old ash. A spindle hums softly in your lap as your fingers twist coarse thread, each pull echoing with tension. Outside, the village bustles with its usual midday murmur, goats bleating, carts creaking, neighbors bickering over apples. But in here the quiet is heavy. You're seated low to the ground near a hearth whose embers barely glow, wearing a woolen dress that scratches and sticks in all the wrong places. You're 16, maybe 17. Your mother says you're of age, which seems to mean you're ripe for being handed off like a jug of beer at harvest. But there's a problem. You've said no. And worse, you meant it. The tanner's boy asked, grinning with the same mouth that yells at dogs and leers at girls. Your parents said he's decent. Your mother didn't ask what you thought. She stated it like she does the weather. He's coming tomorrow, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. Don't be foolish, but you were. You said it again. No. And now the mood in the house looms darker than the miller's son's jokes. Even the loom's rhythm feels accusatory, your mother's silence louder than a scolding. You feel the weight of your refusal settle like damp fog in your lungs. Because in this village, like so many in 14th century Europe, saying no isn't just disobedience. It's disruption. It's dangerous. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from a faraway place or in the middle of the night, let me know in the comments where are you and what time is it right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit on your creaky stool, the spindle trembling slightly in your palm. Your thoughts blur like the thread slipping through your fingers. You remember the way the tanner's boy looked at you last market day, how he spat near the blacksmith's forge, how he elbowed past an old woman, how he stared too long. And that's the man you're meant to call husband no. A soft word, but it has teeth. Saying no should be your right, but in your world it's a disturbance, a cracked gear in the village machine. The village wants order. Boys marry girls, fields are planted. Deals are struck. A refusal that echoes. It embarrasses your father, angers your mother, unsettles the priest, and gives the neighbors something to gnaw on at the well. You can already feel their eyes, the ones that watch from behind latticed windows, the ones that squint across the bread stall, the ones that measure your worth not by your hands or your kindness, but by your compliance. You're not just the girl who said no, you're the girl who thinks she's better. And that's dangerous. You lean forward toward the hearth, its warmth fading. There was a time you thought marriage might not be so bad. You'd watch neighbors walk down the path, hands folded shyly, veils askew, cheeks pink from nerves or cider. But then you saw what came after. The bruises, the silences, the way the baker's wife flinched when her husband's voice rose even when he wasn't speaking to her. You want a life, not a sentence. But in this village, refusing a match, especially when land or livestock hang in the balance, isn't just a private choice. It's a public offense, and everyone knows it. You're aware that each moment you delay, each no you whisper, draws a circle around you. Smaller, tighter. You glance across the room, your mother's hands work the loom like she's punishing it. Her mouth is a line. She hasn't spoken to you since yesterday. The tanner's boy is coming tomorrow. That was a statement, not a plan. You imagine standing there again, saying it once more. No, maybe louder. Maybe braver. Maybe softer with tears. But will it matter? Will your words be weighed like wheat, or will they be brushed aside like dust from a table? A breeze slips under the door. The chill makes you shiver. Outside you hear a rooster crow, then a cartwheel thunk over a stone. Inside, your world feels still and trapped. You've heard the stories the girl from 2 villages over who refused her suitor and was sent to live with a cousin so far away she may as well have vanished, or the one who was brought before the priest, made to explain her heart like it was a sin. You remember her eyes the next time you saw her, hollow. Your fingers slip and the thread snaps. You sigh. You pick up the spindle again. You'll spin tonight like you always do, but the air feels different now. The cottage smaller, the loom louder, the shadows thicker, and somewhere deep inside under your ribs and behind your spine you feel it growing something fierce and quiet and wild. Not quite hope, but not surrender either. The candle on the table is unlit, but you can't stop staring at it. It's thick with beeswax, slightly warped from summer heat, and its wick curls like a question. The village calls it the truth candle, a quaint name for something used in the church courts. The rumor goes, if you lie before God, the flame will flicker or go out. If you tell the truth, it burns steady. You wonder how many girls have sat where you are, eyes darting between fire and priest hearts pounding under wool dresses, while robed men asked whether they were being prideful or sinful or defiant. You wonder whether they broke before the wick did. Because in this world, you're not just a daughter or a girl with a strong will, you're part of a sacred social structure, and refusing to marry doesn't merely break a deal, it breaks order. The church courts don't exist just to bless marriages. They exist to enforce them. Since the 13th century canon law has ruled over betrothals like a shepherd's crook over sheep, what begins with a disagreement inside a cottage can end with you standing before a bench of clergy, their eyes narrowed under hoods, their fingers steepled in judgment. They won't ask, is she safe? They'll ask, is she disobedient? And if you think they'll believe your truth, that the tanner's boy has a cruel streak, that he sneers when your mother isn't looking, that he once crushed a lark's egg between his fingers just to see what it felt like, think again. The church doesn't care for bruised intuitions. It wants vows, it wants heirs, it wants order restored. You shudder at the thought, not of the boy, not even of the marriage bed, but of being forced to explain yourself to a priest who's never once asked a woman what she wanted. A priest whose candle might burn steady whether you lie or not. You heard once about a girl in a nearby village. She refused a match arranged by her uncle, said she felt it in her bones that the man was wrong. They took her to court. The priest asked whether she was bewitched, whether she had consorted with a traveling singer, whether she was concealing something. She said no. Her mother wept. The priest declared her obstinate and fined her family 2 goats. By the next harvest, she was married anyway. Your mother moves in the background, ladling soup into a wooden bowl. The clang of the spoon is sharper than usual. She doesn't look at you. You wonder if she's already spoken to the priest, or the tanner's parents, or both. Your father won't stop this. He's a man of few words and fewer confrontations. He sharpened his axe in silence after your last refusal. The edge gleamed for hours. You pick up the spindle again even though your hands are shaking. You try to steady your breath. But the thought of court, of standing in that cold room with its stone floor and narrow windows, of answering questions designed to trap you in contradictions, makes your pulse flutter like a trapped bird. They say the court is there to protect consent, that no one can force a girl to marry, but they don't say that consent can be ground out of view like flour between millstones. They don't say that refusing can be labeled sin, pride, stubbornness. Or if the priest is in a poetic mood rebellion against God's plan. You look back at the candle. Imagine it lighting. Imagine it flickering with every breath like it knows the fear in your gut. Imagine it going out just as you say the tanner's name. And then what? Will the court fine you? Will it fine your family again? Will your mother cry in public this time? Will your brother, barely 12, be mocked at thee? Well, you've heard rumors of girls who kept saying no, who were denied entrance to the convent, who were marked unfit for religious life and also too proud for marriage. One girl, they say, was sent away entirely. Not quite exiled, just forgotten. You pick at a callus on your palm. The room feels tighter. Your mother has gone outside now. The door left ajar. Cold air slips in. Somewhere down the path, a dog barks. Somewhere closer, a bell chimes. Tomorrow, the tanner returns. You remember his last visit? How he smiled too wide. How he stepped too close. How he spoke to your father, not to you. He wants land. Your family wants peace. You want air. If you say no again, you may find yourself before the church court within the week. They'll summon you. Your father will walk beside you in silence. Your mother will wring her hands. The priest will ask questions you can't answer truthfully, not without losing more than just your say. You look at the candle once more. Joke number 1. If courts are fair, you're hoping for a judge who's bad at lighting candles. You chuckle softly. The sound startles you. Then you sigh, set down the spindle and move towards the door. Outside, the village breathes in the winter dusk. Smoke rises, carts roll, but none of it feels safe. Tomorrow, you'll be asked again. And the question won't just be about marriage. It'll be about obedience, about silence, about survival, and the answer might not be yours to give. The well is quiet now, but your memory of it isn't. You can still hear their voices, those women hunched around the stone rim, gathering water and tossing barbed glances. The moment you passed, the conversation changed, not in silence, but in tone. Laughter turned tight, their words bent like thorns. One muttered something about spinster curses. Another asked if you were still too proud for a good man. They didn't whisper. They didn't need to. Because gossip in the village is law unwritten but potent, and once your name dances on their tongues, it never leaves. It swirls through the lanes, slips into baskets with loaves, curls around hearths like wood smoke. It stains your place at the feast. It infects the handshake of trade. It echoes in your brother's silence and the flick of your mother's eyes. And worse, it isn't just gossip, it's punishment. The courts might wait for a priest's decree, but the village acts faster. Their disapproval hums through the noon air like flies over old stew. The women at the well wear aprons like armor and sharpen words like knives. They don't need judges. They have stories. Remember what happened to Isolde's niece, one said loud enough for you to hear. Too choosy. Wound up cleaning leper pots before winter took her. That wasn't an anecdote. That was a warning. A sermon in gossip's clothes. And it works. You've seen how quickly smiles vanish when names are dropped. How easily a girl becomes a pariah. It starts with stories, whispers about arrogance, about dark eyes and darker moods. Then the tray dries up. Then the bench beside the fire is suddenly full when she enters. Then she's fetching her own water while the others chat 2 feet away. That girl becomes Old Maud. Or worse, the reason your crops failed. You think about that now, spinning wool that won't sell if your name carries a shadow. You think about the butcher's wife who used to greet you with a full-toothed grin and now just nods with her mouth pressed flat. About the boy who once offered you a baked turnip and now crosses the lane without looking. Refusing a suitor isn't just personal. It's communal. It makes people uncomfortable. It disrupts stories they have told themselves for generations about women and duty and how happiness is arranged, not chosen. Your refusal exposed a crack in the system, and the village is quick to plaster it over with shame. That shame arrives in small doses. A turnip gone missing, a skipped invitation, bread that costs more than it should. Your brother's boots wearing thin because the cobbler's suddenly too busy. Your mother's sighs lasting longer than usual. The weight of it builds not in law, but in air. You feel it pressing down on you, now invisible and undeniable. Some say gossip is harmless, but it's the oldest form of social control. A flock of words designed to peck you back into place. And the worst part, It often comes from women, not because they hate you, but because they were once you, or feared becoming you, or barely escaped it. They whisper curses not to damn you, but to save themselves. You step out into the lane, now spindle-forgotten air biting at your sleeves. The village hums with its usual life, oxen, grumbling chickens, darting carts, squeaking over stone. But your steps feel heavier than they should. Not because of your feet, but because of eyes. You don't need to look to know you're being watched, judged, labeled. Joke number 1. If gossip had a scent, it'd smell like wet straw and spoiled butter. You almost laugh but catch yourself. The well women might still be listening. You walk toward the market, past the baker's stall. His wife doesn't look up, past the tailor who used to offer scraps for your spinning. He's busy now, so busy he doesn't even hear your footsteps. It's not open hostility. It's worse, it's subtle. The kind that makes you question yourself. Makes you wonder if maybe you are too proud, too odd, too cold, too much. But you remember the tanner's boy's hands, the way he leaned too close, the way his knuckles whitened when he held his mug. And you know it isn't pride keeping you from marriage, it's fear and survival. The village, of course, doesn't care. They'll say you think you're better, that you're waiting for a prince, that you read too much, that you were cursed at birth, anything but the truth that you simply want to live without being bruised. You turn back toward the cottage. Smoke drifts from the chimney. Your mother will be back soon. Dinner will be quiet. You imagine the well again, the whispers, the sideways glances, the slow freeze that turns people into statues around you. And you wonder how many refusals before your name becomes a warning 1-2. You've said no twice, once quietly, once with tears. This next one you fear will make it official. You glance toward the church spire black against the sky. There's no sermon today, but the lesson is clear. Joke number 2. If gossip is a game, you're already losing. You open the door to the cottage. The warmth is faint. The embers have faded. You sit down again at the spindle wool slack in your lap. The world outside spins fast, but you spin slower, softer, like a whisper refusing to become a shout. The candle on the table remains unlit. Your mother enters behind you. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. The well's stories have already spoken for both of you. You're still by the hearth when the thought creeps in, what if they send you away, not to a suitor or a convent, but simply away? Beyond the hedgerows, beyond the lanes, beyond the only world you've ever known. Exile. The word isn't said aloud, not yet, but it hangs in the corners of your cottage, in your mother's tightened jaw, in your brother's too quiet stare, in the space between village glances that don't last quite as long as they used to. In medieval Europe, exile could come in many forms. It wasn't always a dramatic decree from a bishop or a magistrate. Sometimes it was softer, crueler, just the slow unraveling of your welcome. A skipped greeting, a closed door, a merchant whose scales tip too heavily when you buy grain, a feast where there's mysteriously no room for one more. Or worse, a wanderer's mark, a simple cloth patch sewn onto your cloak, a warning stitched in place. This one does not belong. You've never seen one up close, only heard the stories. But your skin itches at the thought of one now red perhaps, or black frayed at the edges from the wind. It's not just a symbol. It's a scar. Joke number 1. If exile's a journey, you'd like a map, a mule, and maybe fewer wolves. You shift on your stool and glance at the cottage door, slightly ajar. The village path beyond is quiet midday, giving way to the hush before supper. Even the dogs seem subdued, but you know what silence can mean here. It doesn't mean peace, it means judgment gathering its breath. There's a girl from a neighboring village, Margit, whose tail you can't shake. She refused a marriage too. Her father wanted her to wed a wealthy butcher. She said no 3 times. Then she said it too loudly. The next thing anyone knew, she was gone. Her cottage emptied overnight, her name avoided like rot. Someone said she begged in the next shire. Another said she froze outside a monastery wall. Either way, she vanished. Not just from the village, but from memory. Like a pebble tossed into a deep dark well. You rise and step to the doorway leaning against the frame. The wood is splintered where your brother once carved a rabbit. Your eyes follow the lane's bend, past the smithy, toward the fields. You've walked every step of this village your whole life. Every mud rut, every barley row. And now the thought that you might walk away from it alone, marked, shunned, it's terrifying. But it's also possible. Exile doesn't need a judge. It just needs consensus. And consensus is fickle. Your refusal of the tanner's boy, your distance from the miller's son, your unreadable expression at the well, all of it adds up. Like tally marks no one lets you see, until suddenly they become a sentence. You've heard whispers of girls pushed out after 3rd refusals, of families locking doors from the inside, of elders calling it protecting the village's harmony. But it's not harmony, it's a slow execution of belonging. You remember old Maud again spinning at the edge of the village, her hut half swallowed by moss, her fire always smoky. She speaks to no one now, and no one speaks to her. She's not quite exiled, but she's a step away. You wonder how many steps do you have left before you reach her joke number 2. If exile's freedom, it's the kind that comes with wolves, hunger, and no blanket. Your hands grip the doorframe knuckles white. You think of the church again and the candle they might light to test your truth. You think of the tanner's boy's heavy breath, of your mother's sigh, of your brother's boots needing mending. It would be so easy to say yes. And yet, you also think of walking, of woods thick with fog, of strange paths leading to stranger lands, of sleeping under stars and waking with nothing but your name, no safety, no shelter, but no suitor's hands either. There's a terrible power in being cast out, a horror, but also a strange clarity. Because when everything is taken, there's finally nothing left to fear but hunger and wolves. The cottage smoke curls around you now, soft as a blanket that no longer warms. Your mother stirs porridge behind you. The spoon clicks against the pot like a metronome marking your choices. You turn back to the room, sit again, and pick up the spindle. It feels heavier than before. Maybe it knows. Maybe it remembers every thread ever spun in sorrow. In fear, in hope, you pull the wool taut and begin again. A slow, familiar rhythm. A sound older than gossip, older than chords. Your fingers work while your mind spins ahead. Where would you go? Who would take you in? You have no dowry, no allies, no convent has sent for you. And the beggins. That's a dream whispered in market stalls, not an option offered to girls like you. And so you spin. For now, because it's all you can do. The spindle hums. The hearth stays cold. Joke number 3. If exile's a story, you're hoping for a hero, or at least a warm pair of shoes. You glance once more at the doorway, half expecting someone to be standing there. A priest, a neighbor, your fate in a cloak. But there's no one, just wind and wool. You're still by the hearth, the spindle spinning slow in your hand, but your thoughts begin to drift further than exile. What if you stay? What if the village doesn't cast you out? The court doesn't drag you in, but no one helps you either. No suitor, no husband, no safety net. Just the long, quiet road of life as a spinster. In medieval Europe, refusing to marry didn't always mean banishment. Sometimes it meant something quieter, slower, a kind of living exile inside the very place you've always called home. And the currency for that life work. Grueling, thankless, lonely work. Joke number 1. If spinning's a career you're aiming for employee of the century with no pay and no lunch breaks, you tug the wool a little too hard and it snaps. Again. A metaphor, perhaps. Spinsters named for this very act of twisting wool into thread had few choices. Spinning was the most common. It was low status, low wage, and endless. Hours upon hours of wool and fingers of thread and barter. If you're lucky, you trade skeins for bread. If not, you pile them up in the corner like hopes no one wanted. You think of Maud again. Her wool is thin. Her hands shake. She hasn't sold a decent skein in months and no one mentions it. They just walk past her at the market. You saw her once bartering 6 hours' work for half a loaf and 2 onions. The merchant's wife didn't even look at her. There are other jobs, none better. You could serve in a wealthy household, scrubbing floors, fetching chamber pots, scrubbing again. You've heard the stories, girls sleeping on straw in pantries, slapped for slow hands, praised only when invisible, and always, always watched. You could brew ale. Maud tried that too, but she had no space for barrels and no coin for malt. The village men drank it anyway, then haggled over the price like it was piss from the well. One threw up outside her door. No one cleaned it. You could make rushlights, candles from dipped reeds. They sell cheap and burn fast. Your fingers would be stiff with tallow, your dress always smelling of smoke. And still you'd be poor. You think of all this as the spindle starts again. Your thread is uneven, weak, like your future maybe. Joke number 2. If work's a ladder, you're climbing one with half the rungs missing and the top's on fire. Your mother is by the door, now speaking in low tones with a neighbor. You catch words, oats shortfall next harvest. Her voice is tired sharp around the edges. Her eyes flick toward you once. Just once. You know what she's thinking. One more mouth, no more grain. You're not just refusing a man, you're refusing income, stability, a shared hearth, and in return offering, what exactly? Thread, you remember the tanner's boy's laugh, how it curled mean and small like smoke from wet wood. You'd rather spin until your fingers bleed. And yet, even thread won't save you. Not really. You'll still be the girl who said no. Still be the weight your family drags each winter. Still be poor. You think about the beguinage, again that whisper of a place where women lived together, wove together outside of marriage but inside community. A dream. You have no coin to get there. No priest's favor to vouch for you. Just wool and a cottage in a village that no longer smiles. The spindle slips from your hand. It hits the floor softly, but the sound still startles your mother. She turns, watches you, says nothing. Her silence is thick as stew you'll never afford. You bend to pick it up. Joke number 3. If labor's a song, you're stuck singing the chorus forever with no melody and no one clapping. You sit back down. The hearth is cold. You haven't felt its warmth in hours, only its ash. Outside the village begins its evening shift. Cows low. A cart creaks. A child laughs. Life goes on, but you feel like a ghost with a task list. Spin, trade, repeat. You think of women who survived like this. Quiet, bent, threadbare. You wonder how many truly chose it and how many were just left with nothing else. The spindle hums again in your fingers and the thread begins its crooked dance. It's not much, but it's all you got. The spindle wobbles in your grip, now not from inexperience but fatigue. Your fingers ache, your shoulders curve a little more each day. The wool in your lap is coarse and the hearth offers no comfort. Cold embers and colder choices. And then the thought creeps in. Charity, not work, not exile, not the court or the convent. Just waiting for others to feed you. You've seen it before, the line outside the church after Mass. A slow trail of bowed heads and patched cloaks. The priest's assistant with a ladle broth sloshing in dented bowls. Sometimes bread, sometimes scraps. Always silence. In medieval Europe, especially by the 14th century, charity was the final rung on a broken ladder for women like you. Spinsters, the poor, the ill, the unwanted. Joke number 1. If alms are mercy, they come with a side of smugness and a sermon you didn't ask for. Charity was offered, yes, but always at a cost. Your pride, your name, your independence. Churches kept track. Not just with lists, but with alms tokens, little wooden chits often marked with symbols. You'd hand them in for bread or broth or worn shoes. But the tokens weren't just currency, they were brandings. This one needs help. This one couldn't survive. You imagine one now in your hand, etched with your failure. You think about that widow your mother once brought food to. She wouldn't meet your eyes, clutched the bread like it might vanish. You were too young to understand then. Now you do. Charity isn't warmth, it's waiting at the edge of the village hoping someone remembers you exist. Your mother is back at the loom, her movements are slower, her back more curved. She hasn't spoken since this morning when she told you the tanner's boy would be by tomorrow. Not a question. A pronouncement. You haven't answered. But your silence speaks, and hers does too. You're still sleeping in her cottage, still eating her bread. Every mouthful tastes more like debt. She won't say it, but you are now a burden, a cost, a regret stitched into the family cloth. Joke number 2, if charity's a gift, you're hoping for a return policy and a full refund on the shame. You've heard the murmurs, that girl's still not married. What's her family thinking? They'll be feeding her forever. And the worst part is they're not wrong. Your father won't say it, but his chopping grows louder. Your brother won't say it, but he avoids your eyes. Your mother won't say it, but every stitch of that loom is a sentence. You think of the tanner's boy again, his hands, his voice, the way he looked at your sister before she married, and you know you'd rather beg. But will the village let you? You've seen Sheruti the priest at the charity table. His eyes linger, his sighs loud. He judges every ladleful, every loaf. Some days he makes them wait in line just to remind them who feeds whom. You could try the merchants' wives, but they toss crumbs with a sniff and a sideways glance. If they give you food, it'll be with a whisper. She's still not married. Poor thing, no warmth, no kindness, just stale bread wrapped in pity. You wonder how long your mother's silence will last before it sharpens, before she turns that loom toward anger, before your room becomes a corner of storage, before someone else's child takes your seat. You step to the door. The smoke swirls. The air smells like rain and straw and something sourifer, perhaps. You've heard of women who lived off the village for too long. The charity dried up. The church said no more. One ended up sleeping under a cart. Another vanished into the woods. They say she joined a band of thieves. Or died. You grip the spindle tighter. The wool thread breaks again. Joke number 3. If charity's comfort, then cold broth and side-eye stares are the softest blankets you'll get. You sit once more. The thread is frayed, and so are you. You think about the convent again, the beguines, the quiet dignity of communal life. But even they need something you don't have: coin, or approval, or time. And time is shrinking. The tanner's boy will be here tomorrow. His boots on the step, his voice in the air, his smile like a wolf in borrowed sheep's clothes. You'll say no, again, and then what? No job that pays enough, no kin who'll fight for you, no lover in hiding, no lucky inheritance, just wool and ash and silence. You spin the thread once more and picture yourself next winter at the church gate, arms token in hand, stomach aching, face blank. It's no life, but it may be the one waiting for you. You shift again on the creaky stool, and the spindle dips as your fingers falter. The wool catches, you sigh, the air is thick, the hearth long gone cold, and outside the village, hush has settled into something uneasy. A dog barks once, a cow lows, but the true noise, the whispers, you can almost hear them curling like smoke beneath the cottage eaves. Witch. The word hasn't been said aloud, not yet, but you've seen it before how rumors work. They start like seeds at the well where the other women gather and glance over shoulders. They bloom in moments a cow sickens. A child coughs, a man's luck falters, and suddenly someone has to take the blame. And a woman who refuses to marry. A girl who says no? That's unnatural. Suspicious. In medieval Europe, especially by the 14th century, the shadow of witchcraft was beginning to stretch further across the land. Not yet the fiery hysteria of later centuries, but a steady crawl of fear and finger-pointing. And most often those fingers pointed at women like you. Alone, stubborn, quiet. Joke number 1. If you're a witch, your only spell is making terrible wool skeins and awkward silences. You've heard stories. A woman in a nearby village refused a marriage. The next week, a farmer's calf was stillborn. She was accused of a hex. They tied her hand, tested her with water, said if she floated, she was guilty. If she sank, she was innocent, but of course she drowned. Either way, she lost. There's another tale. A woman blamed for a spoiled harvest. Said she tied a witch's knot in secret to curse the fields. They dragged her to the bishop's manor. She disappeared. You picture it now, your own wrist bound with knotted rope, the villagers watching. Your mother silent, the priest's eyes cold. It wouldn't take much. You've already drawn suspicion. You're not married. You're not pregnant. You're not obedient. That trifecta alone is dangerous. And worse, you think too much. You think too. You question. You sit here spinning not for a husband's tunic, but for your own survival. That's not how it's supposed to be. A woman's hands are meant for tending children, not tending her own thoughts. You remember the well again. The snide mutters. One voice said, maybe she's cursed. Half a joke, half a test. No one disagreed. You poke the hearth. Nothing flares, not even an ember. Old Maud still lives at the village edge. She's dodged the word witch, but just barely. Her rushlights flicker behind a sagging door. You've seen children dare each other to run past her hut. She'll hex your sheep, they giggle. She'll steal your voice. You've spoken to her. Once. Quietly. She gave you nettle tea for cramps. Her hands shook. Her eyes didn't meet yours. And afterward, even your mother looked at you sideways. You were supposed to avoid her. But you were in pain, and she helped. And now that tiny kindness clings to your name like nettle on skin. Joke number 2. If you're a witch, your broom's still stuck sweeping this very cottage while the world accuses you of flying. The priest hasn't said anything, yet, but you've seen how he watches. The truth candle remains unlit on his table, but you know its flame waits for an excuse. A whisper, a tremor, a sin. He's warned the parish about women who defy God's order, about Eve's mistake, about pride dressed up as piety. You don't know scripture, but you know fear. And suspicion is easier than justice. A cow dies, a man stubs his toe, a marriage falls apart, and suddenly the woman who said no to a tanner's boy is the cause of it all. You think about the paths out. The begging house, they're whispered about too. Too many women under one roof, the men say. That can't be holy. One girl joined them last year and was called heretic by her uncle. A boy threw a stone at her veil. Even safety wears the mask of suspicion. Even quiet becomes cause for alarm. You sit again. The spindle spins, though your hands tremble now. You can feel it, all of it pressing in. The tanner's boy with his heavy hands and heavier voice will be here tomorrow. If you refuse him again, the scorn will spike. Your mother might beg or lash out. The villagers might not speak to you for days. Or worse, they might speak too much. One whispered word too many, one withered plant, one unlucky incident, and you'll no longer be just a girl who said no. You'll be a warning, a lesson, A story told by the hearth about that one who thought she was different. Joke number 3. If witchcraft's a charge, you're hoping for a spell to vanish this whole village quietly, painlessly with a poof. But there's no spell, no escape. Just your hands rough and red spinning thread thinner than your chances. You glance at the truth candle again. It hasn't been lit, but it might. Soon. You glance up from the spindle as your mother's loom finally stills. The rhythmic clack that filled the room all morning has faded into a silence even thicker than smoke. She's at the hearth now, stirring the same thin broth you've eaten for 3 days. Her back is to you, but her silence is louder than any of the priest's sermons. You know what it means. You're not just disappointing her, you're tarnishing something deeper. Family honor. In medieval Europe, particularly among peasants, honor wasn't a gilded crest or a knight's banner. It was practical, fragile, and tightly knit into every transaction, every glance, every whispered trade agreement over barley or firewood. Honor was how your father secured good wood for winter, how your mother bartered for eggs, how your brother avoided being called names in the lane. And now, with each refusal, you're pulling at those threads. A quirky custom in some households, families hung kin cloths, embroidered bands displaying symbols of lineage above the hearth, a small, proud gesture. Yours hangs there too. A little faded, a little crooked, but unmistakable. You've seen your mother glance at it often. Lately, she avoids its gaze. Joke number 1. If honor's a cloak, your family's is patched and fraying fast. Your father hasn't spoken to you today. He's outside splitting logs. You can hear the angry rhythm of the axe biting into damp wood. You know that fury isn't about firewood, it's about you. Because marriage is more than a vow here, it's an exchange. Your refusal doesn't just say no to a boy. It says no to land, to peace, to alliances. You think of the Tanner's family, how their small stretch of pasture borders yours. How a wedding would have stitched those plots together like mended seams, a future secured with livestock and mutual obligations. Instead, you're unraveling that dream. And the village sees. You saw it this morning. The baker's wife offered fewer crusts. The miller's apprentice didn't make eye contact. Even old Bram, who once called you his clever little lamb, looked away when you passed. This isn't just your shame anymore. This is theirs. Joke number 2. If shame's a fire, your family's hearth is burning low and smoky. You glance again at the kin cloth above the hearth. The embroidery has always been rough. Nothing fancy, just a crooked wheat sheaf and a spool of thread. But it meant something. Your mother sewed it herself before your birth. You remember her pointing to it once when you were small. That's who we are. Honest hands and good harvest. Now you can't meet its stitched eyes either. The Tanner's boy will be here tomorrow, and he knows he has leverage now. Your resistance is almost quaint, like a stubborn calf refusing a yoke, but the pressure is no longer just his to apply. It's your family, the village, the system. Marriage isn't about your happiness. It's about the stability of everything. And if you fracture it, the cracks ripple outward. Your younger brother's chances of apprenticing with the smith slimmer now. Your mother's hopes of trading for better wool next market day, compromised. Your father's pride in tatters. You wonder if you walk into that church and say yes, if you let the Tanner's boy lead you to the altar and seal the deal with a grip. Like iron, will everything snap back into place? Will the whispers stop? Will your mother's broth taste better? Or will you sit by the same hearth in 5 years bruised and small, trying to tell your own daughter that saying no was never really an option? Joke number 3. If honor's a song, you're singing off key and dragging the whole family choir down with you. You rub your fingers together, they ache from spinning, the wool has thinned to nothing, again breaking like your patience. The village outside is quieter now, but you know they're listening, even in silence, listening for a wedding bell, or a scandal, or both. You think of old Maud again, always Maud, the spinster at the village's edge, her kin cloth long gone, her name muttered more in warning than affection, No one visits. No one remembers who she was before she said no too many times. You wonder, did she have a kin cloth once too? Did her mother's broth ever taste this bitter? The stew bubbles behind your mother now, but she still hasn't turned around. Her shoulders are a language all their own. Disappointment, fatigue, worry stitched into every line of her woolen sleeves. She hasn't asked you again. Not today. She doesn't need to. You're thinking it for her. Joke number 4. If family pressure were a spell, you'd be floating by now. You glance back at the spindle in your lap. One thin thread still attached, still turning. You spin because it's all you can do. Not to clothe, not to earn, but to stay moving in a life where every other direction feels like betrayal. Your hands are raw, your breath is tight, and the air in the cottage feels too still, like it's waiting for you to give in. The hearth is still cold. The spindle lies quiet in your lap, thread wound loose like your thoughts. Outside, the village exhales in slow, smoky murmurs. Afternoon fades, and with it, the fragile quiet between days, between decisions. You hear the knock before you see him. 3 dull thuds on the warped wooden door. The tanner's boy. He's early. Your mother doesn't move at first. She stiffens where she stands, her broth spoon paused mid-stir. Then she wipes her hands on her apron, not looking at you, and goes to open the door. He steps in with a gust of mud-laced wind boots, heavy on the packed dirt floor. Taller than you remember, broader maybe, or maybe just more certain. His eyes scan the room, landing on you like a claim. Joke number 1. If men were storms, this one's a thunderhead with fists. He nods to your mother, first respectful enough, but the second glance, the one for you, carries no such courtesy, just expectation. He doesn't speak yet. He doesn't need to. You look down at your lap, the wool suddenly unbearable in your fingers. He's here to offer the choice again. In medieval Europe, especially in tight-knit villages, marriage offers often circled back like persistent bees, especially when families had land to join, debts to ease, or mouths to marry off. This wasn't courtship. It was a negotiation disguised as fate. You glance at your mother. Her hands are folded now. She says nothing. Just waits. That says everything. You know the terms, already marry him, and your family keeps the tanner's favor access to good leather, to tallow, to warmth in the winter, maybe even a piglet or two. Say no again, and well, you've already seen what's next. You've lived the rumors, the silence, the scorn. You've spun the wool of your punishment. He speaks finally. We could still make it right, he says, voice low and even, before harvest, as if this is a wound to bandage, as if your fear of his quick temper and calloused hands is just a wrinkle in cloth. You don't answer. Not yet. Joke number 2. If proposals had a scent, his would be tallow and smoke. Your mind flickers through escape hatches, exile spinning until your fingers crack, begging with a rushlight in the village square. You think of old Maud again, her eyes downcast, her dress patched, her words few. You could join her at the edge of the world, or end up worse. Then your thoughts drift unexpectedly to the moments before this life. To childhood laughter, fields of barley, your mother's songs before they dulled with disappointment. Was this the future she imagined for you, or just the one she feared least? Because make no mistake, marriage is fear too. Fear dressed in veils and blessings. The tanner's boy steps closer. He doesn't touch you. Not yet. But the space between you and him collapses. You can smell the iron tang of his sweat, hear the tightening breath in your chest. I'll speak to Father Leonard, he says. Set the date. If you're ready. Ready? You want to laugh or cry, but neither would help. You think about how marriage will not end, the scorn only shift it. No longer disobedient, you'll be too proud, too cold, not grateful enough. And if things go badly, if he drinks, hits who will listen, who will believe the wife over the tanner's son. Joke number 3. If safety is a dowry, yours was lost at birth. He shifts again. You'll have a good roof, warm clothes. A pause. You'll be better off. You believe him about the roof, at least, but better is a cage better if it's gold-lined. You say nothing. He doesn't press, not in words. But he leaves the weight in the room when he steps back, when he turns to your mother and gives her a shallow nod. I'll come tomorrow, he says. That's not a question either. Then he's gone. The door shuts behind him, but the cold doesn't leave. You sit there. Your mother turns back to the broth. It bubbles like nothing happened, but her posture softens, her shoulders slacken. She thinks it's done, that you've agreed, and maybe you have, in the only way this world recognizes, by not screaming, by not fleeing, by still spinning. You glance down at your hands. Joke number 4. If silence means yes, then history is full of fake brides. You pick up the spindle, thread it again. The wool is dry and brittle. It snaps as soon as you twist. You don't cry. The thread breaks, and you don't cry. You just start over. But something stirs beneath the quiet defeat. Something small, like a whisper tucked inside wool. A memory, or maybe just a dream. One word. Begin. It's not a word said aloud often in your village. It slips under the tongue like a secret. But you've heard it once, maybe twice, whispered between older women at the market. Not a convent, they'd said. Not wives, not nuns. Just women together, living, spinning, praying, choosing. You lift your eyes from the spindle. Maybe the begins are just a story. But maybe they're real. In medieval Europe, especially from the 13th century onward, pagan communities began to spring up across towns and cities from Belgium to the Rhine. They were informal groups of women, often unmarried or widowed, who lived together in modest dwellings called Begenhofs. They pledged no lifelong vows, obeyed no strict abbess. They supported themselves through weaving, nursing, and teaching. They read, prayed, sometimes even owned property. They weren't saints, but they were sovereign. You imagine them now, grey mantles draped over sturdy shoulders, fingers stained from dye and candle wax, soft songs echoing in stone courtyards, a life of rhythm and refuge, far from the tanner's boy, far from village sneers and the clack of your mother's disappointed loom. Joke number 1. If freedom had a uniform, it might be linen and quiet courage. You've never seen a Begin, but you've seen what you're not. Not a bride, not a nun, not yet a ghost. The idea grows, begins to breathe. You rise from the stool and walk to the small window, its glass long gone, just wooden cloth now. The sky is streaked with the gold of ending day. Somewhere beyond the woods, maybe over hills and rivers, is a town. And in that town, maybe a door. A wooden one, perhaps blue, worn from time, but open. A place where a woman might go and not be questioned. Your heart beats once stronger than before, but the path is not easy. To reach a begging house, you'd need coin travel protection, or mercy. Most beggins came from towns, not villages. Most had a little dowry, a family who tolerated their choices. You have none of that. Only your hands and your name thin as thread. Your mother would never let you go. The priest would call it pride. Your father would call it foolishness. The tanner's boy would laugh. Joke number 2. If beggings are the ladder your village buried the first rung. Still the thought won't let go. You imagine telling your mother, I want to live as a beggin. She'd squint, ask if that meant you were giving up men or giving up bread. Maybe both. You imagine telling the priest his candle would stay unlit. That's not your calling, he'd say. A woman's path is through obedience. And then he'd suggest a prayer. Or a husband, you imagine just leaving, just walking away, feet blistered, dress torn, sleeping by hedgerows, risking wolves and men alike. But you also imagine reaching it. The begging door, being welcomed not for your silence or your stitching or your womb, but simply because you showed up and chose. Joke number 3. If salvation's a house of women, you're ready to knock. The smoke in the cottage swirls, catching the last sunbeam before it dims. Your mother doesn't notice your stillness. She's folding cloth now, whispering something about soup bones and barley, planning tomorrow like you'll still be here, like you'll say yes. The spindle rests beside your hand. You don't touch it. Because maybe this is the moment, the first moment, where a thought becomes a decision, where you don't wait for the tanner's boy to return, where you pack what little you have, where you leave before someone locks the door, where you walk towards something that doesn't yet have a name but smells like bread you've earned, and sleep without fear. You breathe in, you breathe out. The window flaps softly. Maybe it's the wind. Maybe it's the world calling. Joke number 4. If beguines take strays, you're ready to meow at the gate. Your hands reach for the small cloth satchel under the bed. You don't feel it yet, you just consider. But that's more than yesterday. That's more than ever. And somewhere maybe in Ghent or Bruges or a smaller town, with a kind name, a grey-robed woman opens a shutter and smiles, unaware that a girl far away is spinning a dream that just might carry her there. But the Beguine door remains far and night is coming closer. The hearth is cold. The broth's gone thin. And your father's boots thump outside with a rhythm that spells fatigue and fury. You don't rise. Not yet. Because now your thoughts wander somewhere stranger. Sadder. Widowhood. It isn't the kind of dream anyone speaks of, especially not girls your age. But you've noticed. The freedom that drapes itself like a shawl around the shoulders of the village's widows. They move differently, speak with fewer apologies. Their husbands are gone, and something heavy has lifted. Replaced by other weights, yes, but ones they carry alone. It strikes you now, how strange it is that to live alone as a woman, you must first survive marriage, then grief. In medieval Europe, widowhood was often the only route to female autonomy. Upon a husband's death, many women gained control over property finances and decisions that were once denied them. Some even inherited land. Others continued their husband's business, innkeepers, weavers, brewers, merchants of salt and wool. They became heads of households, finally seen not just as wives or mothers, but as persons. Of course, they had to bleed for it first, cry, bury, maybe break. You imagine yourself beside a grave hands clasped neighbors murmuring behind you, you in black suddenly respected, free to run your cottage, but only because no man remains to run it for you. Joke number 1. If freedom comes after a funeral, who picks the flowers? And that's when the dark irony dawns. The only way out of marriage often was through death. Sometimes yours. You've heard stories whispered between work and weaving. A woman who fell down a well, another who didn't wake after a wedding night. Suspicions never spoken loud enough for truth, but they float there, weightless, terrifying. You stare at the unlit candle again. What would widowhood mean for someone like you, who never even reached the altar, who never took vows or wore the dress or kissed the man? Would you have to fake it? Dress in black anyway and call yourself his just to earn back your breath? Joke number 2. If widow's weeds grow from lies, you might start planting. Your mother clears her throat. The broth is served in a cracked bowl, thin as your courage. She doesn't say much tonight. Neither does your father. But you feel the shift, the tension of a family whose plans are unraveling. You're costing them something. Pride-land alliances, and in their silence you glimpse the future. If you married the tanner's boy and he died, would they weep or breathe? You know his temper. The way he looked at you last summer like butter he wanted to spread, not share. If you married him and survived, would widowhood be mercy? Would it be your only chance to live? You imagine it, your husband cold, the house yours, the loom yours, the breath in your lungs finally belonging only to you. It's a grim thought, but not the worst. Because the worst is this, that your freedom is only legitimate when it's wrapped in mourning. Joke number 3. If independence is a corpse's gift, you're hoping for a fast illness and a clean will. You set the empty bowl aside. Your hands return to the spindle, not because you want to spin, but because movement is the only kind of peace you're allowed. The wool slips tangles, just like your thoughts. Beggins feel too far, spinsterhood feels too narrow, the convent too walled, and widowhood, well, that takes a sacrifice, one you can't ask for. So you sit there, with a life that hasn't begun and a death that hasn't saved you. Maybe tomorrow the tanner's boy comes back. Maybe he brings more than words. You imagine a fight. You imagine bruises. And then you imagine your name whispered with a different kind of reverence, widow. Independent, alone, alive. You shouldn't want that, but you do. A little. Joke number 4. If dignity is only worn by widows, maybe black suits you after all. The fire doesn't catch tonight. The hearth stays ash. But something in you burns a little brighter, flickering toward truths no one says aloud. And somewhere far from this cottage a widow closes, her shutters, counts her coins, and sleeps without anyone's breath beside her. The fireless hearth glows with nothing but thought now, and your hands ache from spinning a future that hasn't formed. You haven't moved from the stool, but your soul feels like it's walked miles through courtrooms, marketplaces, exile, widowhood. And now you arrive at yet another door, the convent. A different kind of escape. The kind paved in stone and silence. The kind where the price of peace is permanent surrender. Medieval Europe's convents were curious paradoxes, both refuge and prison. They offered unmarried women sanctuary from the demands of marriage, safety from unwanted advances, and often the only opportunity for literacy learning or solitude. Inside those cloisters, women could pray, study, sing, and vanish. Joke number 1. If hiding from marriage takes a vow, better hope you like bells. You think of the convent not far from the woods. You've seen it once walking with your mother to barter eggs, its walls high and grey, its door low and arched. A handful of veiled women in the garden, their hands in the soil, their eyes on the sky. Some were born for it, your mother said. Others, not. It strikes you that in the hierarchy of acceptable lives, becoming a bride of Christ is somehow more palatable than being simply yourself. But even this path isn't open to all. Convents, like marriage, required resources. A dowry often smaller than a marriage portion, but still real land coin, a cow, a cousin's patronage. Without these, even escape came with locked doors. And you don't have coin, just calloused hands and a family growing resentful of your resistance. You imagine knocking at that cloistered door. What would you say? I refuse the tanner's boy. I refuse the miller's son. I refuse the village's plan for me. Would they open the gate? Or would they sense that you don't want piety, you want space? Joke number 2. If a convent's a haven, don't expect central heating. You try to picture life inside those walls, waking at dawn, chanting psalms in chill stone chapels, scrubbing floors in penance robes, no laughter, no flirtation, no gossip by the well, but also no threats, no weddings, no tanners. And maybe in that silence, a version of yourself might stretch out a little, become a scholar, a healer, a chronicler of truths no one outside would let you write. Still you worry, because convents are not built on rebellion, they are built on surrender, and your spirit, for all its bruises, does not bend easily. Would they clip your defiance like a veil over your eyes? Would they thank you for your obedience as you burned in silence, your fingers tremble over the spindle? The wool pulls thin. Your mother hasn't spoken, but she's watching. You feel her gaze like the weight of a stone crucifix. She'd rather see you cloistered than cursed, veiled than shamed. Even the priest might approve. You wonder if they'd take you tomorrow if your parents packed the oat sack and sent you walking. Joke number 3. If vows are freedom, who sets the rules for the lock? Night is falling now. The village quiets into supper clatter and sleeping dogs, but your mind races through the rhythm of convent bells, prime terce, sext none, an entire life rung out in intervals. You think of old Hilda, the scribe nun whose psalter your neighbour once borrowed, her margin notes more alive than the printed words, little jokes, little sorrows, a full self hiding in sacred script. Could you live like that? Not free exactly, but hidden. Protected, forgotten. Joke number 4. If heaven's gate is made of stone, better bring warm socks and no opinions. The candle on the table remains unlit, a quiet symbol of judgment still to come. You can almost hear the priest's voice. The convent, my child, is the holiest retreat. Better there than in sin. But even holiness feels like a compromise when all you wanted was to live. Not piously, not rebelliously, just honestly. No veil, no apron, no ring. You want to be, and not be anyone's, but the world outside offers only categories: wife, widow, witch, servant, sister. You must choose one, or risk being none, and none in this world is dangerous. So tonight you sit wrapped not in a cloak or habit, but in choices that all feel like cages with different locks. The convent door may not open, but in your mind you knock anyway. And somewhere in a stone cell in another village, a girl who said no too many times murmurs her evening prayer, knowing that the walls around her are safer than any house she might have married into. She sleeps in silence, alone. And tonight you wonder if that's peace or penance. Either way, it's one path fewer to choose from. And the spindle keeps spinning, even as your hope thins like the thread between your fingers. The spindle turns slower now, as if it too is weary of weaving fates that never quite fit. You're still at the hearth, still staring into cold embers that mirror the quiet tension behind your mother's silence and the village's scorn. You've imagined the convent. You've weighed the court, you've feared the road, and yet here you are, still unmarried, still spinning, still unclaimed, which makes you something else entirely: a spinster. That word, sharp-edged, hissed behind veils and whispered near wells. It isn't a title so much as a sentence. You weren't always a spinster. Once you were just a girl. But now, refusing suitors, resisting the altar, you become marked. Not legally, but in every glance, every refusal to trade, every invitation that never arrives. Spinsterhood in medieval Europe wasn't just a stage, it was a boundary. A liminal space where women who didn't marry quietly aged into obscurity, neither wife nor nun, neither honored nor hanged. Joke number 1. If spinsterhood's a profession, you should at least get a hat. You think of old Maud, the woman at the village's edge. She's the cautionary tale, wrapped in skin, stooped back rushlights for sail teeth, like rotted fence posts. Children toss stones at her hut. Adults pretend not to see her. But you saw her once, her hands wrapped in linen, cradling a cat like a prayer. She said nothing, but her eyes said, "I was you." You wonder what day she became invisible. Was it the third suitor she refused, the second time she begged bread, or simply the moment she grew too old to be worth marrying? You shift on your stool. Your joints ache. You're too young to be her, and yet already you're being carved in her image. The edge of the village is more than a physical place. It's a social map. And you are drifting toward its corner stitch by stitch. Joke number 2. If being alone were a sin, you'd already be sainted. Work doesn't save you. You've spun wool-patched tunics, brewed broth. You've offered to help mend, fetch water, care for a sick child. But every kindness is filtered through your status. Spinster help is suspect. Spinster food must be blessed twice. Spinster words always come with a second meaning. You feel yourself fading, not in strength, but in presence. People no longer ask your name at the market. They call you that girl or her. Soon it'll be that old woman or worse, her again. Your family treats you as both burden and shame. Your father's voice shortens around you. Your brother no longer jokes. Your mother clacks at her loom like a metronome of disappointment. The hearth isn't warm. It's just the only place you haven't yet been cast out of. You consider moving to the outskirts, setting up your own space. But with what the hut needs straw, the roof needs patching, and you need food daily and friends eventually. Neither are guaranteed. Joke number 3. If spinsterhood came with a pension, you'd retire rich in loneliness. You wonder what it would be like to live truly alone. No marriage, no church, no family, just the sounds of sheep and birds and the rhythm of the seasons. It sounds poetic, until winter, until sickness, until someone steals your only kettle and no one comes to help. The world is not kind to women who don't belong to anyone, and spinsterhood in all its quiet is a declaration, I belong to no one. You think of the church's judgment, how refusal becomes rebellion, how solitude becomes selfishness. They won't call you wise, they'll call you waste. You think of the priest and his flinty eyes, how he talks about Eve and her disobedience, how he sees your resistance not as strength but as sin. And you know with cold certainty that if a plague came tomorrow, they'd point to you first. The woman who said no. The woman who wanted something else and refused to accept the options she was given. You spin the wool again, the thread too tight. It snaps. You flinch. And in that snap is everything, your fear, your defiance, your grief. You gather the loose ends and tie a knot. Not a witch's knot, not a vow. Just a knot, a spinster's knot, a mark of survival. You don't know what tomorrow brings, whether the village will turn colder, whether your family will stop feeding you, whether the tanner's boy will return with fire in his fists. But tonight you are here, not married, not exiled, not holy, just stubborn. Joke number 4. If spinsterhood is invisibility, then maybe you can finally sneak out of this mess. Outside a bird trills its evening song. It doesn't ask who owns you, and you close your eyes imagining what it would feel like to live without the need to explain yourself, to just be. Even if no one sees you, you're still by the hearth. The spindle rests in your lap quiet now. The thread has snapped, the wool lies tangled, and your hands, those same hands that held hope, defiance, fear, are finally still. And yet nothing has changed. The tanner's boy may come tomorrow. Or not. The church court may summon you. Or perhaps your parents will plead with the priest to delay it just a few more days. But none of that matters right now, because tonight a decision hovers like the smoke above your cold hearth. Will you give in or walk? This is the moment medieval girls never told stories about. Not weddings, not funerals, not great escapes. Just this silent reckoning at the center of 1,000 invisible pressures. Joke number 1. If decisions had recipes, yours would be 1 part dread and 2 parts doom. You've weighed everything. Marriage to the tanner's boy, his temper, his smirk, the way he looked at your mother, not you, as if the deal had already been struck and sealed. A court hearing that could twist your silence into sin, judges in robes, a candle flickering with accusation, men of God looking for guilt where there is only fear. Exile, a wanderer's patch, begging on strange roads where your name carries no weight and your stomach carries no food. Work, spinning wool until your fingers bleed, brewing ale for drunks, cleaning floors that stain you more than the soot. Charity, tokens clutched in trembling hands, sermons with every scrap of bread, shame baked into every bite, witchcraft rumors, tied knots, crops failing because a woman said no, a village looking for a scapegoat and seeing your face, family honor, your father's silence, your mother's tightening jaw, your brother's downcast eyes, a kin cloth above the hearth that now feels like a noose. You've stood at every fork, and none of them lead to freedom. So what's left? Joke number 2. If every path is a trap, Maybe you can dig. You step outside. The air is sharp like the truth. It smells of dung and damp hay of barley mash and chimney smoke. The village paths are quieter now, cars long gone, the last gossip whispered. But you can still feel them watching. Behind shutters, behind curtains, behind every closed door is a story about you, the girl who said no, and now they wait to see what story comes next. You think about walking, not away from the village, just away from the roles, from the vows, from the weight. But the world doesn't offer away as an option. It offers marriage or shadow. A woman without a husband is a threat, a puzzle, a crack in the system, a reason for other women to wonder if they too might say no. And that makes you dangerous. Joke number 3. If being a danger came with armor, you'd at least look cool. You return to the hearth. The spindle is there, silent, waiting. You pick it up. Not because it offers safety or freedom or power, but because it's the only thing left that's truly yours. Your labor, your rhythm, your thread. You spin again. The wool trembles. The thread tightens. This time it holds. You breathe in and think. There's power in the stillness, in the refusal, in the idea that not choosing any of the bad choices is still a choice. You've not escaped. You're still in the cottage, still under your mother's roof, still facing a dozen forms of consequence, but your spine is straighter now. The fire may have died, but inside something kindles. Maybe you'll leave tomorrow. Maybe you'll stay and face the court. Maybe you'll be cast out and wear a wanderer's patch. But tonight you choose not to kneel. You choose not to surrender your fear to someone else's comfort. And that in its small, quiet way is everything. You look to the spindle. You tie a firm knot in the end of the wool, a symbol, a promise. Not to the tanner's boy, not to the priest, not to your family or your village or even the ghost of old Maud on the edge of town. A promise to yourself, to hold on, to endure, to remain stubborn even if no one thanks you for it. Joke number 4. If rebellion were a recipe, all you've got is stale bread, a thread, and this cold hearth. And somehow that might be enough. Your hearth glows faintly now, not with flame, but memory. The kind of glow that lingers after a fire dies. A whisper of warmth in the smoke. You sit quietly, spindle in hand, wool wound tight like the breath in your chest. You haven't said a word, not out loud, but your silence has spoken volumes. The choice to refuse to resist, to remain unmarried in medieval times, it wasn't a shout in the street or a banner held high. It was this: a quiet girl, a broken thread, 1,000 expectations bearing down like stone. You think of the stories no one tells, the ones where nothing grand happens, where no lover comes galloping, no miracle arrives, no judgment burns you at the stake. Just the quiet defiance of staying seated, spinning still, because not every rebellion needs fire. Some need patience. Joke number 1. If courage wore shoes, yours would be worn thin at the toes. Outside a wind lifts. It brushes the thatch, rustles the dry straw near the door. You can hear a gate creak open and shut, some neighbors maybe, but it sounds like the world exhaling. The day is nearly gone. You glance toward the unlit candle still on the table, the truth candle, the one priest's light during testimony. It's untouched. It waits like the church, like the court, like the village, for you to fold. But tonight you don't. You know now what it means to refuse marriage in a world built on submission. You've seen the traps, the courts, the exile, the labor, the shame, the rumors, the hunger, the loneliness. You've seen what happens to women who say no, and still you've said it. That makes you dangerous in their eyes and quietly powerful in yours. You think of the Beguines, the women who found each other beyond the rules, weaving freedom between the loom threads and prayer beads. You wonder if somewhere far off there's a place where you could go, not to escape judgment, but to find peace in it, a place where your thread might be welcome. But even if there isn't, even if this cold cottage is all there is, you're still here, spinning, living, breathing. Joke number 2. If resistance had a uniform, it'd be wool-stained fingers and a weary spine. Your mother's loom has gone still. She watches you now, not with approval, not with open arms, but with the silence of someone who's chosen resignation over confrontation. That might be the closest thing to mercy you'll get. Maybe in time she'll understand, maybe not. But tonight she doesn't stop you, and that matters. The last light of day filters in through the cracks in the shutters, drawing golden lines across the earthen floor. Lines like threads or paths. You trace them with your eyes, wondering where they go, wondering where you might go one day. You've chosen not to marry the tanner's boy, not to be handed over like coin in a land deal, not to kneel at the altar just because someone else said so. That means you've chosen poverty, suspicion, hard work, isolation, but also dignity, control, silence, yes, but silence of your own making. You think of the girl at the well who sneered at you, the priest who would question your soul, the neighbor who might whisper of curses the next time a cow goes dry. You are not safe, but you are not broken. You rise. The spindle hangs at your side like a quiet weapon. You walk to the door and push it open again. The night breathes in, cool, quiet. A few stars blink above pale as memories. The village is still. It waits. But so do you. Joke number 3. If the future's a road, you've at least chosen the boots. You step back inside, closing the door gently behind you. The embers in the hearth are low, but you kneel. You stir them, add a bit of kindling, not because you need heat, but because fires deserve not to die alone. The flame catches slowly, a single orange spark curling upward like the tail of your thread. It is enough. You sit again and spin, and now the spindle rests. The thread trails soft and loose across your lap, no longer tight with tension. Just a line of quiet possibility. The hearth crackles faintly again, not roaring, just murmuring. The kind of fire that doesn't demand attention, only presence. You've walked through 1,000 fears tonight, fear of judgment, of exile, of being cast aside, and yet somehow you stayed grounded. You chose not what was easy, but what was yours. Maybe you didn't run away, maybe you didn't shout or fight or flee, but you did something far rarer. You remained, you listened to the silence, you held your line. In that stillness is a kind of power that most songs never sing about, the strength to stay with yourself even when every path tries to pull you away. Tonight maybe that's all you needed, not a hero's ending, just a little more peace in your chest, a breath that doesn't shake, a thread that holds. So let yourself settle, let your eyes close, slow and easy like shutters at dusk. Let your breath follow the rhythm of the spindle, soft in, soft out, until even the thread drifts loose in your hand. You don't have to carry the weight anymore, not tonight. Sleep gently, friend. The story will still be here in the morning.